form, and that is how he analyzes. So the the basic arrangement, the basic pankti, two entities and one point. That is the idea of relating two entities in a broad relational context is the punctuator form. Then he went on to apply this, explore this further in various things. So we can say that from a new reading of Indian thought traditions, with the idea of this punctuator form, it's not just a new reading, it's a reconstruction of Indian thought traditions he has reached. It's a different phase of thought. Now he's sort of kind of reinventing certain analytic equipments and recreating or reinventing certain analytic equipments which can be sort of applied to various contexts. When he went to Indian Institute of Advanced Studies, there he wrote a book which had these essays on formal theory of history, justice, and society. So that's basically formal for him doesn't mean aupcharik or formality, the dead formality that we talk about, but formal is analysis in terms of forms. So he applied this, his understanding of forms to analyze this various things. So, but in all these three also what is fundamental is a theory of action, theory of karma, deeds, theory of action as theory of deeds. So in history, in his essay on history, he sort of distinguished, he tries to sort of interpret what exactly is the difference between history and itihas. And his contention is that all the differences emerge from, if we notice the basic thing, that history is basically history of injustice, and itihas is basically about recalling instances of justice. So all the methodological differences that also emerge stems from this kind of difference, because you cannot really do an objective analysis of instances of justice in the past. So basically you have to resort to some kind of narration, stories and things like that when you are talking about instances of justice from the past. Whereas the question of injustice, there are always questions of always is in need of a different kind of examination, not a moral examination like we do about instances of justice, whether it was right or not, whether there was justice done, or whether there was, so where in injustice, whether the injustice really occurred or not occurred, or whether it's occurring or not occurring, the kind of examination that is required is something what is historical enterprise is engaged in, where historical enterprise is basically based on autonomy of evidence. So where there is evidence and the evidence is analyzed and so on and so forth, and from this he interprets how this different ideas of itihas and history emerges. And in his paper actually he kind of a historical itihas also, he sort of whether there can be a historical itihas, that question also he deals with. And here also the analysis, actually if we go further, then it comes from action only, it emerges. How we there's another very important conception of a narrative, which is there, a narrative structure, which is the structure of a story, any story. And Itihas is basically narrative in that sense. Though even history has not been actually able to, despite its emphasis on autonomy of evidence, is not able to really get rid of narration altogether. That remains. But and then he addresses this question of justice in another paper, which is related to this. There is an analysis of action, and then he says that when there are various actions, there has to be a conflict between actions. Then how that conflict is to be resolved. So then there are various resolutions of those actions from the past which are available to us as narrations and so on. And then there is another level of sort of, if we move from action to conflict between actions, resolution of actions, then there's some specific fiats which are there, some vidhi, some kind of instructions or guidance, kind of sentences which are there, that comes at another level. And he makes a very formal kind of analysis that if we gather all such instances of, and this resolution of conflict he calls justice, because resolution means just resolution, it has to be just resolution. So there is, if you take a set of all the resolutions from various conflicts from the past, so, but this is a very unwieldy kind of set. What kind of condition we can put on this? So he says, if we put two meta conditions on this collection of, of all various resolutions from the past which are there, one is, if we make two meta assumptions. One assumption is that all conflicts are justiciable. That in principle, even though we may not be actually able to resolve a particular conflict at some particular time, but if we assume that in principle all conflicts are justiciable, resolvable in a just manner. And the second condition he puts is that there is no action which cannot be read. So there are no secret actions. In principle, there will be practically some secret actions and all that, but in principle, all actions can be read. So he says if we make these two meta-assumptions, then this set of, this collection of all instances of justice from the past can become coherent within itself, if we apply these two assumptions. And so in this way, he evolves his formal theory of justice, and he goes on to analyze further that there is a conception that each person, there is an inherent in all this theorizing, is inherent that each person is juridically independent. So he says even children cannot be taught, that what is just and what is unjust. Even if somebody very close to you is doing something and somebody is trying to tell you that this is just, whatever you do, but within yourself you have your own sort of judgment of what is just and what is not just, whatever you may do. So, no human being is fundamentally, juridically autonomous. That is one thing. But then he says that if everybody in society was, behaved according to their own, what they think is just and unjust, then there will be no conflict in society. But it doesn't happen. So that emerges, these problems emerge because we have to sort of suspend or transfer our power of judgment to others. So like when we pay a certain price for a certain thing that we buy, we don't sort of think whether this is the just price or not. So we have sort of given it to economists and government and all to decide what is the just price. Similarly, if our children is getting educated, we have left it to the teachers and those who formulate syllabi and all. So in this way, we suspend our juridical autonomy and in order to live. But this kind of suspension of our autonomy, it leads to creation of power, what he calls power towers. So different kind of power towers in society, financial power and cultural power like in education and and the power of punishment when that is given.